The imperturbable Jacques Villeneuve sits in his car in pole position, an enormously impressive young man, 25 years old. Nothing seems to faze him. He worries about his opinion and not other people's, and his record in Formula One speaks for itself. Now you look down, and to the left of the picture, just coming into the shot, would have been La Source. That was the hairpin that David Coulthard was talking about, and I was talking about earlier on. The cars start on a quite short stretch between the exit from the bus stop, which is a sort of chicane, and the run down to La Source, and that is a 180-degree hairpin which leads downhill into this Eau Rouge section that you've heard so much about already. And as Martin has said, it truly is an awesome section where you go left and right climb, doing about 160 miles an hour, and the speed that you leave Eau Rouge governs the speed that you climb up Kemmel, which is quite a steep incline, to Les Combes, the highest part of the circuit, before you start to drop down. It's a distinctive part of the Spa circuit, and you'll see it at the end of this first session when they come out of La Source, and it is going to be magnificent on the first lap and every other lap after it. Damon is not going to settle for anything other than first place if he has anything to do with it. You heard him say that by finishing second in every race, even if Jacques Villeneuve won them all this year, he would still win the World Championship by 1 point. But that won't do. He quite rightly is saying, I am a racing driver, and if I'm a racing driver, I'm going to go for victory here, and that would make him virtually impregnable in the World Championship. So there is the Spa-Francorchamps circuit. It's only about half the length of its previous self, which was about 8 miles long, and that was even more incredible than this one. But for safety reasons, they decided that they had to have a shorter circuit, and I don't think anybody disagreed with it. And they have managed to retain the character superbly. 2 Williams on the front row of the grid, and this time Damon Hill still on the front row. He's been there every time this year, but Villeneuve ahead of him. Schumacher hoping for wet weather, third. The 2 McLarens are on the first 3 rows of the grid, and Jean Alesi is behind his teammate Gerhard Berger. Brundle is ahead of his teammate Rubens Barrichello. Eddie Irvine, of course, well behind Michael Schumacher. But the 2 Saubers are together on row 6. Followed by Mika Salo, who's had a very difficult time in practicing. Olivier Panis went much better in the warm-up. Pedro Diniz crashed in the warm-up, but he's perfectly all right, as is his car. The 2 footwork cars have both made the grid, but the last starter is Pedro Lamy. There are just 19 cars and drivers in the Belgian Grand Prix, because Lamy's Minardi teammate, Giovanni Lavaggi, failed by a mere 0.2 of a second to beat the 107% of pole time qualifying limits.
Now, of course, the number of refueling stops may well be instrumental in deciding the outcome of this race. And just how many are right to do in theory? Well, it depends on the weather, because if it's dry, it's somewhere between 2 and 3. We've got a 44-lap race here, and I think we'll see the standard kind of pit stop routine being 2 stops, the first one round about lap 15, the second one lap 30. Of course, if it's 3, that would be lap 11 for the first, lap 22 for the second, and 33 for the third. Now, if it's wet, though, then 1 would be the way to go, because that way you've got a greater opportunity to be flexible in when you come in for slicks and wets. You're going to be coming in less for fuel. You're going to come in just once, apart from which the wet really doesn't penalise, or rather weight is not so much of a penalty when it's wet. And this is the big thing around here. Tyres, in fact, don't wear particularly fast. We don't have a tyre degradation problem here at Spa, but what we do have is a heavy influence from the weight of the car. And when every 10 kilos or 15, 12, 13 litres of fuel will slow the car down by half a second a lap, that's a major consideration. And the reason for that is these long, fast-flowing corners on the one hand, but particularly the long drag up the hill from the Eau Rouge corner, and that was where this man, Jacques Villeneuve, was absolutely flat out through there. And much to the concern, it has to be said, of Damon Hill, because Damon could not quite bring himself to be absolutely flat at that particular corner. The cars do, of course, have slightly different setups on, and it may well have been that Jacques' setup enabled him to do that. But Jacques is very, very good on fast corners, and he's also very good on chicanes. And it's the combination of that, the combination of Villeneuve being good on the fast corners and through the bus stop chicane, which has really given him the edge here in qualifying, and it's been there throughout, and we mustn't forget that this is his first ever time at the Spa circuit. He has not tested here, and he really has impressed a lot of people.
As has Michael Schumacher there for his courage in coming back as quickly as he did and as well as he did after that terrific crash that he had on Friday. Now that's the view down to La Source that Jacques Villeneuve sees. We're looking from the camera over his head. There is the gantry with the 5 starting lights, and when they all go out, the race begins. Gerhard Berger there is on the grid in 5th position.
Yes, and we saw then a glimpse of the difference in the surface. Now, when the drivers go around on this warm-up lap, which is about to start very soon, we're only 45 seconds away from that, they're going to be not just warming everything up, and that's going to be particularly important here because the relatively low ambient temperature, where we're not talking in the kind of 27 degrees that we've had recently down in Hungary. This is 10 degrees or so, 12 degrees cooler, but also these wet patches. Now, as the cars go around, now here's a view. Now we're on the inside. We can see slick tyres on Michael Schumacher. All top 6 are on slicks, and Martin Brundle very helpfully let us know that he felt would be the right way to go, and he's been around the circuit, and therefore he will have known what it was like out there. Now you see that, you can see a few waves of water coming across, but actually I have to say it looks pretty dry now all the way across the grid. I really do hope it is, because clearly we do want Damon Hill to have the very best chance of getting away to try and get ahead of his own teammate. That's on our left there, Jacques Villeneuve. So away they go, waterproof covering over the timing gear, and this is a very short drag into this first corner. Now we need to watch out for this off the start. You only get to about 120, well 140 miles an hour at the maximum before this one, La Source. Let's be careful, let's watch the surface as we go around, because it really is going to be important. Now it looks frankly completely dry at this point. Coming down the hill and weaving around, getting the temperature up. Now through Eau Rouge, this really is a lot steeper downhill than it looks there, and it's massively steeper coming up. It's a real huge amount of G-force to the bottom of that as you flick right and up the hill. It's not flat out for virtually everybody, and it won't be, I'm sure, in the race. It'll be a gentle feather. By a feather we mean just easing back off the throttle, but it's still 6th gear at 170 miles an hour. Up the long straight here, up to Kemmel towards Les Combes, the right-hander, and this is where we're going to see overtaking is most likely. Again, look how vigorously the drivers are really working those tyres. The brand new tyres need to get the labels off. We can see it on Panis's Ligier there. Diniz behind him. Diniz once again qualifying very well compared to his teammate Panis. Right-hander, this is about a third of the way around the circuit now. The hairpin, that rivage out of that up to 3rd gear. And it looks pretty dry going around there. That's the left-hander. And that was where Michael Schumacher had his big spin. Villeneuve there. This is how you warm the tyres up. You could warm them up much better by actually going flat out around the circuit. But of course the problem with doing that is that you will end up sitting on the grid. Villeneuve on pole will be sitting there for far too long, and he'd overheat his engine. So he can't afford to get too far ahead of the pack of cars. Now the start has been something which has been a hot topic of conversation, and of course particularly with regard to Damon Hill. At the last Grand Prix in Hungary, Villeneuve got the jump on Hill, and it was Villeneuve that won the race, largely as a consequence of that good start. Now for here at Hill, Damon's been, Spa I should say, Damon's been working hard on his start technique. He's had 3 days testing in Barcelona. They tried a handbrake mechanism to try and help, because Jacques Villeneuve uses his left hand to use the clutch. Therefore, and crucially, he can use his left foot to hold the car dead still as is required on the start line. He's not allowed to creep or he'll get penalized, and then he can feel the clutch starting to engage with his left hand before finally, when the lights all go out, launching off. Now Damon can't do that, because if he eases the clutch up, he's got his right foot on the throttle, and therefore he's very likely to start creeping forward. So it's a little bit more of a black hole for him. Having said that, that is the way that others start. Other cars do have handbrakes. The Benetton cars have a handbrake button that works very well, but Damon really hasn't felt comfortable with it. He's got this handbrake button, but he's elected not to use it because he really hasn't found that he can use it consistently, reliably, dependably. So he's going to have to just try and make a good start. He's made some poor ones, but he's made some very good ones too, and we shouldn't forget that. But coming up now to taking their places, don't forget Schumacher does not tend to make good starts, we know that. So looking at the grid, it's going to be surely Villeneuve streaking off, and behind that, Coulthard, watch for him on the left-hand side, because he could make a good start.